What is the worst way you've seen someone mismanage their money? One of my co-workers bought a new car. Because, wait for it, she couldn't afford to put tires on her current one. This one just hurts. It hurts my brain. People only see the payments, not the cost. My brother-in-law bought a used BMW for $15,000 with a credit card at 26% APR. This is the winner. Yeah, he is the definition of financial irresponsibility. He used to buy Gucci belts and Armani shirts. Now that he has 2 young children, that stopped, and he is driving a beat-up Trailblazer. He is 42 now. Lives in a bedroom he rents from my in-laws with his 2 kids and wife, and is working 2 jobs to get by. It's sad, especially for my 2 nieces. But I feel little sympathy for him. BC 4 years I lectured him about being financially responsible, but he cared less about that than the image of having money he put out. Grew up fairly wealthy. Went to a private school with lots of other wealthy kids. Knew one girl who had 2 wealthy parents pass away when she was young. She lived with an uncle. She was messed up as a kid. Really wild. Always the first to try everything. In her own way incredibly sweet. Always protected the less popular kids. Anyways. She hits 21. Gets a huge trust fund. Her uncle puts up a fight for the money because he knows she's going to go nuts with it. It wasn't for the cash. He had much more than her. Ultimately he loses and she gets everything. It's the beginning of the end for her. She blows through massive wealth in 2 years doing untold amounts of coke. Binge drinking. Trips to crazy places. Constantly surrounded by people using her for party money. We're talking millions of dollars here. Not a cent invested anywhere. Anyways. 2 years later she's back with the uncle. Not a penny to her name. He loves her, so of course takes her in. Everyone that hung on to her for the past 2 years is gone. Everyone laughs at her behind her back. A few overdoses and drug use left her a little slow. She tries school but it doesn't work. Her uncle gave her a job but it's a token thing. At least she's lucky enough that she had someone to look after her in the end. A guy I worked with was always complaining that he was poor. Although I later found out that this was solely due to bad budgeting and impulse spending. He was really good at his job, so I suggested that he do some freelance security consulting on the side. He did a job for a high-end jeweler which paid him around £2,000 for 2 days work. He was ecstatic that he finally had enough money to fix all the problems he'd been putting off for ages, like the oil leak on his car, a new pair of work shoes, and get his boiler fixed. At the end of the job, he was leaving the retailers with cash in hand when he spotted a high-end watch in a display case which was £2,000 down from £3,500 or so. Unable to pass up such a bargain, he handed the £2,000 back and walked out with the watch instead. 2 days later he was complaining because his fridge was empty. My response was, at least you can use the watch to time how long it takes you to starve. I have an idiot friend who's getting something like 30% of his wages garnished. Why? Because he forgot to pay his student loan. He's shit at paying bills, and it's not because he doesn't make the money for it. He has a decent job. He just literally ignores paper mail and emails reminding him and then eventually demanding him to pay off things like credit card bills and his student loans. If he does bother to read them, it literally goes in one ear and out the other. Just slides right out of his mind. After a few months he'll remember. Log into his account. Pay the payment in full with accrued interest and shrug it off like it's normal. Somehow he forgot to pay his student loans for something like a year and it went to collections. I told him he could even just set up automatic payments for that sheet and he agrees it's a good idea. And then just never does it. I offered to set it up for him and it's always later. Friend got $150k in life insurance from her mom passing. It was gone in a year. She paid a $20k bail for her boyfriend. At the end of that year, he was also gone. She works at Popeyes now. The idea of bail is that you get it back though. Not if her boyfriend violates the terms of the bail bondsman. Well, the accountant at the small business I work at does a lot of funny things with money. Has a perfectly good, paid off car. But it was slightly too old to drive for Uber to make extra money, so she got a lease on a brand new car through Uber. After a month she found out she wasn't making enough extra money from Uber to even pay the lease. And her commute was too far to drive the Uber car to work and back, because they limit the miles. After she weaseled out of her Uber lease, she decided she needed a brand new Harley that she had no idea how to drive. This was over a year ago. She has ridden it exactly once around her neighborhood. She will be paying for this motorcycle for another 4 years at least. She took out a second mortgage on her home to fix it up to get ready to sell. She is so happy with the remodel that she is keeping the house. She is a single mother twice over. And is always telling us how some nice man from her church paid for her daughter's school trip or whatever. She is the dumbest person I have ever met, and I am always a little freaked out that she is handling our money. My coworker. She never has the money to pay important bills, but goes on $300 shopping sprees on the weekend. Treat yourself. Pay their current vehicle off with savings. Then immediately trade in that car. And get a car worth a lot more. Only to be back in deeper debt. With less in their savings. This person made a lot of other dumbest choices, but that's a different story. I went to community college my first year. I knew this guy that was from a super low income family, and he received massive amounts of student loans. He blew it all on a used car. Wheels and a sound system. I tried to tell him it was a loan and not a grant. He disagreed. Lost touch with him a year or two later, but he has to be underwater in debt. Divorce. Growing up, we were good friends with a family that had made it big with buying selling airplane parts pre-internet age. The couple went through a nasty divorce that got strung out over a 6-year period. The wife was 100% convinced through her it-bag lawyers that her husband had funneled money into secret accounts. He didn't. And wasn't happy with his initial offer, the mansion, half the multi-millions, and $5,000 a month for child support alone. The court proceedings went on 4 years. And at the end of it all, they both pretty much had nothing due to court fees and lawyer fees. His business failed because of how unstable air travel became after 9/11. If she had just split things and taken that with the mansion and the other payments, she would have gotten $4.2 million from the divorce. Not having worked a day in her life. TLDR, divorce is a hell of a drug. One of my old friends was living paycheck to paycheck. Less than that a month. She was eating food from work for breakfast, which was one of those ice cream places. When I was asking her about her finances to see where she could cut back, she mentioned that she smoked recreational weed every day. Several times a day. But she said, it's only a hobby that I could stop at any time. However, she refused to stop when I told her it was a possible avenue to cut back on if she wanted to comfortably make her bills. It kind of got tiresome to hear about how she had no money for food constantly. I gave my brother a step-by-step plan to cover his rent, keep his job, fill up his car, and pay me back within a 1-week period. He was tight on money. I found him at Foot Locker with a large bag 2 hours later. I have a friend who is 40 years old, single, lives by himself, and will buy weed as a priority over some of his bills. Every 2-3 months I'll get a call asking for a bailout. He is also on social security and lives in a subsidized apartment, pays $120 for rent. Very frustrating to get those calls for help. A friend at 37 who have never worked any job that pay above minimum wages inherited tons of money from his father. Despite having absolutely no experience in any of those positions or even how to manage a business. Suddenly open up a restaurant which was a disaster from day one and closed down not long afterward. Decided to get into photography business. Throw away tons of money on all super fancy equipment he have absolutely no idea what is for or how to use. Never made a penny. Tried to start a DJ business. No bite. Disappeared off face of the earth right afterward. Every once in a while my stepdad will calculate how much money he could save by quitting drinking. then decides to quit and starts spending like he has that money. He doesn't actually quit. Guy I know won £10,000. Then spent that £10,000 trying to win again. I saw a guy at a gas station drop $2,000 on lottery tickets. My uncle managed a tobacco store for years. He had some regular who came in to spend hundreds and even a couple thousands every day on scratchers and lottery. Like, they hung out for hours every day to scratch a few dozens. Trade. Get a couple new ones. Trade. etc. Of course none of them ever broke even or won the jackpot except once or twice, and only because they did that every day for years. These people are an unspoken kind of addicts. People who make $30k and have a $500 plus car payment each month. That and people who don't know how to use credit cards. My friend, whom I love dearly, recently has been driving me pretty insane. Her parents are terrible with their money. And she has been complaining for ages about how inconsiderate and irresponsible they are. How they infuriate her because they buy things they don't actually need with the reasoning of, well, it'll make us someone else happy, so what's the problem? She calls me a month or so ago because thanks to her parents and their irrational spending habits and irresponsibility, she may not be able to finish school. She doesn't know how she'll manage to eat or afford anything she needs. And she can't get a full-time job right now either. So she and her boyfriend, who she's breaking up with soon, decide that instead of saving their very limited money and using it wisely, they would impulsively buy 2 puppies. I don't know the breed, but they'll be huge dogs when they grow up, from a sketchy stranger on Facebook who they don't know and who charge them hundreds of dollars for the pups. Her reasoning for getting them: when she knows she can't afford them, they'll make me happy, so it'll help with the stress of not having any money. I'm still enraged, honestly. The hypocrisy, irresponsibility, and impulsivity is maddening. Me. When I was 18 years old and applied for credit. 10 years later I finally finished paying off those damn cards. On the upside, you learned a valuable lesson. And assuming you don't have late payments on your records, you've now got 10 years of positive credit history. I made this same mistake when I was young and lucked out by never missing a payment. The gift to future me was a stupid high credit score right at a time in my life I want to go Dave Ramsey style debt free and never borrow a cent again. I like to gamble. I wouldn't say I'm an addict, but it sure is fun for me. Any seasoned gambler will tell you, even an addict, don't put down more than you can afford to lose. I like to play a carnival game called Mississippi Stud because it's slow, relaxing, and if you have patience, almost always lucrative. This is a game where you may have to fold 20 hands, but in one hand triple the initial money you put down. That is when you should walk away. But this is where casinos make money, because almost nobody does. I was at a table and this guy hits on 4 jacks. At this table, that's 40-1 odds. And he totaled $4,000 in his win. So he gets up from the table and I am happy for him. He is walking away with a nice chunk of change. Eventually I get up and head over to the roulette wheel to end my stay. Because even though roulette is pure luck, it offers the best exhilaration for me. Few feelings in this world match the feeling of when you hit your number. After a few spins the guy who won the $4,000 walks over and plops the entire stack of cash on the table. He puts all his money on red. It landed on black. My sister has made a lifetime of bad choices. My parents bailed her out so many times. Bought her about 5 cars over the years. She went bankrupt. She had a good job years ago but quit to go back to school to do something else. She spent about 10-15 years I think getting an MDiv and becoming a therapist, subsidized by my mother the entire time. I believe she received at least 100G, probably 200. It took a few years to get full-time work making $60G plus. She was in her 60s by then. Worked only 2-3 years. Was apparently doing great and she up and decides to retire. She'd blown through her share of the inheritance with nothing to show for it. I have a vacation home in Belize. She still owes on a car she bought before mom died. After 1 year of retirement, she comes to me to borrow a couple thousand, after which I told her no more because she would be happy for me to take over for mom. She has had to go back to work. She gets minimum wage. And yesterday, she told me about a friend's son. Mentally disabled in some way but able to live on his own. And his poor financial choices as if she's some kind of expert. I knew a guy that bought a Trans Am, fully loaded, and had a $700 payment in 1985. That's like $1,650 today. He ended up bankrupt. Another guy I know told me he was going to declare bankruptcy over a $4,000 debt about 20 years ago. We were riding in his late model truck. I said, "Why don't you sell the truck? Settle the debt and save up for a new truck." He got furious and yelled at me for saying that. He ended up bankrupt. And still lost the truck. Former co-workers, nurse aides, saying they can't pick up a shift because they have no money for gas. They don't seem to realize that they would have more money if they picked up more shifts. They also seem to have no trouble going out to the bars almost every evening. Full stop. With the bars in the mix. I agree that this is stupid. However, it's not inconceivable that they just don't have the money to drive in for that extra shift and be fine until the paycheck comes in. I am a restaurant GM. I watch most of my servers spend at least 50% of their money on booze and or food. Every single day. They bring food in from another restaurant before their shift. Drink after the shift at a club or bar and then go out and get more food after they have been drinking. I have seen on slow nights where they paid to work that day due to spending their money on booze because they were sad they didn't make very much. My ex-husband Cyril's ex-husband's new wife's parents say that 3 times fast died in a motorcycle accident that ended up with the couple getting around $500,000. My ex Cyl immediately latched onto her ex-husband along with her 7 kids, 4 of which he believes are his. They bought a new house and my ex Cyl moved into their old house. They also bought 5 or 7 new cars for various people and took ex Cyl's 7 kids plus their own to Disney World twice. I believe they both quit their jobs. 2. In less than a year. They had spent all the money and were back all trying to live in the original old house that I believe they lost due to foreclosure shortly thereafter. Guy I knew at uni spent his entire student loan allowance for the semester in 2 weeks. So he got a payday loan out to fund a night out. Like £100 at an extortionate payback rate. Ended up owing £8,000 in a few months. Got a credit card out to pay that off. Maxed out his credit card in maybe 6 months. He didn't work at uni. His family was on the darker side of poor. He was the kid that was going to make something of himself, so he got the absolute maximum in loans and bursaries. And every time he received the money for them he'd spend it in a matter of days on VIPing clubs and bottle service etc. Not even clothes or gadgets or whatever. I didn't even go to uni in a particularly expensive city. Ironically he was studying something like economics or business. Either way, he dropped out at the end of first year and now works as a car salesman earning a fair amount but living in a tiny studio flat and complaining that one of those furniture rental places won't let him rent out something like a 60 inches TV and PS4 because his credit is so bad. We all tried to warn him but we were called stupid because it was free money. There was this guy from a hillbilly town who won the lotto, 1 million Canadian dollar. The guy was definitely not well off before. He was being interviewed by a reporter asking him what he was going to do with the money. He said he had spent already half of it buying pickup trucks for his cousins, his family, his uncles and friends, and also bought 3 snowmobiles and 5 ATVs. Oh well. Hopefully he's happy. My friend is basically a 37-year-old child with a good salary. 1 month his water bill was $700. He asked me if I thought it was because his sink faucet was dripping. I said it sounded more like a broken pipe. He never found out the issue. He just paid the bill and said oh well. Not me. But I was once talking to an uncle who told me about the time one of his younger subordinates burned through $5,000 at a strip club with their credit card. The subordinate apparently got their money back by telling their bank it wasn't them when they received their bill. Then Co then had to educate him about what financial fraud was.